Hey, horror fans, welcome back to Jay versus Horror. And this week, guys, we're giving you 5 more underrated horror films that you can go out there and watch for free anytime on Tubi TV. We're even putting the links to the films right here in the description so you can just scroll down if you hear about a film you want to see. Click the link, boom, you're there anytime you want to watch it. Now, we're going to up our game a little bit and we're going to start challenging some of our favorite personalities out there in the horror podcasting and social media world. We're going to be challenging some of our favorite horror friends to watch these movies, and hopefully they'll leave us a couple comments. They don't have to go into too much detail, but we want them to watch the movies and leave us a couple comments about what they think about the film. So it should be fun. Let's get started, guys. At number 5, I have Visceral, Between the Ropes of Madness from 2012. And we are going to be challenging Dr. Shock Dave Becker from Land of the Creeps, the DVD Infatuation podcast, and probably about 15 million other podcasts. Dave is a very knowledgeable guy and one of the most sought after guests for any show. We've had him on here once. And so we are challenging Dr. Shock Dave Becker to watch Visceral, Between the Ropes of Madness from 2012. Guys, this is a hardcore shock film that works. It's about a boxer who's taken one too many blows to the head. He's trying to get one last shot at a big fight, but while all this is happening, he becomes a vessel of evil and starts torturing and horrendously hurting people. Now, when you hear the tagline for this, the tagline being Between the Ropes of Madness, and you see that it has something to do with boxing, you think that that's where they're going, but it's not. The guy also has a rope obsession and a knot obsession. And he likes to tie people together and tie people up and do crazy things to them. This is a pretty hardcore film. It's a pretty hardcore shock film. I'd put it around number 4 or 5 on my all-time list of most shocking scenes and hard-to-watch movies. But it's also very good. It's a kind of like a passion project. The guy who wrote it, Felipe Eluti, he also directed the film and he stars in it too. And gives a great performance. A lot of times when you see that, you wonder if it's going to be good. It's only an hour and 9 minutes long. You kind of wonder, this guy directed, he wrote it, he stars in it. Does that mean he's a narcissist and the movie's bad? Not in this case. It actually works on all levels. I'd give it, for me, it's an 8 out of 10 film, but that's because I like extreme, shocking films. And I'm telling you guys, I'm putting the warning on this one for reals, okay? And it's not just sexual assault. There is some graphic sexual assault that you won't believe, but there's also just some insane violence that goes on in this film, and it's not told in a linear narrative. So sometimes you'll think, well, if I can get through this scene, I won't have to see it again, only to be fooled when the movie skips around and you're right back where you started from. But it's a very good film. Yeah, I highly recommend it, and we are challenging the Doctor of Shock, Dave Becker himself, to watch Visceral from 2012 and leave us his thoughts about this crazy ass movie. All right, guys, let's move on to our next pick at number 4. Landmine Goes Click from 2015, directed by Levon Bachia, written by Levon Bachia, and also Adrian Coluzzi. It stars Sterling Knight, Spencer Locke, and Kote Tolordava. And this is a pretty good film. It's shocking, but it's not shocking on the level of the previous film we talked about, Visceral. I'm going to be challenging Wesley Jones, the host of Real Talk, REEL, Real Talk, a movie podcast. Great show. They do great work there, great interviews with stars and horror and stuff like that. So check out Real Talk if you guys get a chance. And yeah, we are challenging Mr. Jones to watch Landmine Goes Click and give us some of his thoughts about it. Pretty smart guy, and I'm interested to hear what he has to say about this film and what it ultimately says about violence. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the story, but there's a lot of twists to this film, so I don't want to ruin too much that I don't have to get you interested in it, right? So the film starts out with these 3 friends. We have a boyfriend, girlfriend couple type, and then we have the third wheel, the best friend who's tagging along. And they're backpacking through Eastern Europe, and they end up in this giant field, and surprise, surprise, there just happens to be a active landmine in this field that's been forgotten about from ages ago. And so we're shown here instantly that there's a couple twists in the beginning of the film where there are things going on just between these three characters that are very interesting. I'll put it like that. The relationships that are going on here and where we get to with those are very interesting. We end up at a point where we find out that one of the characters is ultimately responsible for what's happened. It's not an accident at all. And from there, the movie changes. It goes from being this weird thriller where you're trying to figure out what's going on between, these three people to this guy left standing alone on a landmine that's active. And if he steps off of it, he will be blown to pieces. And then a hunter shows up, a local woodsman. And pretty early on, he realizes that he has this guy in a bad position. Also, the girl stays behind with him, and so she's kind of caught up in all this too. And yeah, he starts to play some twisted games with them because he knows he cannot step off of this landmine. And then the film takes a third twist, and the last act of the movie is set further down the road than any of this story, and it is totally insane. The last act of this film is insane. Like, not just the intensity of it, the pressure of it, the look at violence and what is almost always the eventual outcome of violence and revenge. Violence spawns revenge, spawns violence, spawns. You know what I mean? It's a very interesting look. We've seen films like this before that have taken on this kind of subject matter, but we've not seen them end in this manner, I would say. This is very interesting the way it ends, and I can't wait to hear what Wesley thinks about the end of this film and what it has to say. Yeah, good film, guys. I highly recommend this one. I would give Landmine Goes Click. For me, it's a solid 7.5 out of 10. I would go a little bit higher than that even, but there's... Also, I want to point out there is a sexual assault in the movie. Not to spoil anything for anybody, but I don't think it's like going to spoil the plot. There's a sexual assault in the film that is a plot device. And if you're like me and you don't really care about seeing that kind of stuff, I'm a violence person. I like the violence. Show me the practical effects of people getting stuff cut off and things like that. But yeah, if you're not into the, seeing like a sexual assault on screen and stuff, that's not your thing, you can fast forward through this one. It's not, extremely long. But it is a terrible scene, and it does lend itself to what's going on here. But yeah, very good movie. Landmine Goes Click. Let's move on, guys. At number 3, we have Malevolence from 2004. And guys, I am challenging Emily Dunlap from Scary Movies All Night Long on Facebook. She runs a group on Facebook. Emily's starting a new podcast. She's worked with us on Girls Love Horror 2, Regina's YouTube channel and podcast. So yeah, she's very knowledgeable, and we want to try to get some of the ladies out there from horror involved in this, because we know that there's a lot of female horror fans out there, and we just don't hear from you guys as much as we do from the men. So we're trying to get everybody involved. We want to hear Emily's thoughts on Malevolence from 2004, because Emily loves slashers. This is her thing, man. She loves slashers, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's already even seen this one. It's from an era like 2004, 2005. We're not getting a ton of slashers, and some of the ones that we were getting were like independent films similar to The Orphan Killer or Malevolence, or even, I would say, Laid to Rest. Some of those films are not, highbrow slashers. Even Hatchet, when it came out, was not like a big movie, a big theatrical release, right? So those are the types of slashers we're getting at this point. And Malevolence is one of the best ones, and it's basically about a gang and a robbery gone wrong, and they're trying to hold up at a farmhouse. But little do they know that the adjacent property is inhabited by a psychotic killer who is extremely hard to kill. I won't say he's impossible to kill, but it's extremely hard to kill him, because when he was a child, he was diagnosed with a medical disorder that prevents him from feeling any pain. He can feel things like being touched or squeezed, but he can't feel pain. And so later on, he is abducted by a crazy serial killer. And when the serial killer finds out he has this medical thing where he can't feel pain, he thinks it's like a sign from God that he's supposed to make him into like a super killer. And he does. And that's what we're faced with in Malevolence. A great slasher with, they have a family here, like a mother and a daughter who the robbers take hostage. And so we get some like innocence in the middle, in the crossfire. So that ups the stakes a little bit in the movie to where it's not just the bad guys getting killed by a bad guy who's way meaner than them, right? And so you have to have something in the balance. You have to have some stakes there, and that's what we get with this movie. It's really good. I like it a lot. It is cheap. It's done on the cheap, but it's a great slasher, and I think it was a good homage to past slashers. It made some past cliches work, but also did its own thing. So we're challenging Emily Dunlap to watch Malevolence from 2004. Emily, leave us a couple comments and let us know what you think. And guys, go check out Scary Movies All Night Long. It's a little group that's just now getting started, but I like it a lot. There's a lot of good conversation there, a lot of good back and forth discussion, and not so much just memes and, stuff like that, which memes are fun sometimes. We all like memes sometimes. But, sometimes you just want to have a discussion about a horror movie. So, yeah, let's move on, guys. We are moving to number 2. At number 2, I have a little film called Black Mountainside from 2014. And, guys, we are challenging one of our Canadian friends with this one. We are challenging the great Dave Waugh from the Great Fright North podcast, guys. Dave is a really good podcaster. He's got a really smooth voice. He's definitely got the voice for radio and the calmness and all that a lot of us lack, including myself. And he's very good at what he does. I highly suggest you check out that podcast about Canadian horror films, The Great Fright North with Dave Waugh. And we're challenging Dave to watch Black Mountainside. He's probably already seen it, but we're challenging him to give us a few comments about it. Because it's a Canadian film. It's the director is Nick Sostlowski. I cannot say that, man. There is no way to say this guy's last name. Sostakiyskjy. Oh. Yeah, he wrote and directed Black Mountainside. And it stars Shane Twerden, Michael Dixon, Carl Toffelt, and a few other people. And it's basically, it kind of feels like The Thing, but it's different than that. What we have here is a cold, desolate northern outpost in Canada. And we have an archaeological setup here where these guys are digging and making new discoveries. And they're basically just checking like the soil and stuff is really what they're trying to do. But they find some artifacts buried in the ground that have been there since the last ice age. And they can't explain where these have come from. So then strange things start to happen. Like they have some native workers there who quit because they don't want anything to do with these artifacts. And then the men start to show some signs of like psychological deterioration. And also like a physical breakdown to some of their body. And just for some reason the communications go out, supplies stop coming, they're isolated, and it becomes this really crazy movie about how people can go insane if they, you wonder here, is this happening because they believe it, or is it really happening? And so the film is very much more subtle than something like The Thing or a lot of other films that have ripped off The Thing. Another film I think about with this one is a film from a few years ago called The Corridor, which was far more gory and all that. It was like right out there in front. This one is very much more subtle. It's almost an art film, the way it's put forth, the way these guys kind of go crazy and start to turn on each other. It's not your usual thing with this setup. So I went into it thinking, watched about 25 minutes of it, and I'm like, okay, it's a decent ripoff of The Thing. But then the film kind of changes as it goes along, and you see that there's much more to it than that. So, yes, we are challenging Dave Waugh from the Great Fright North podcast to watch Black Mountainside and give us a few thoughts about it. I thought maybe being set in Canada, maybe Dave can give us some insight here if he's got the time. Maybe give us a few comments if there's any inaccuracies about these natives or where this might be set up and all that. So yeah, moving on, guys. We are down to the last recommendation for this week, and at number 1 we have The Day from 2011. We are going to be challenging George Rogers. George hosts the Multiverse Movie Podcast. Great show. They are doing 666 weeks of horror movies. And yeah, it's really been good. I just listened to the episode they did about Salem's Lot. Very enjoyable. Check them out over at the Multiverse Movie Podcast with George Rogers. George, I think, will really like this film if he's not seen it. It's easy to just dismiss this film as like a Walking Dead ripoff. We've seen a ton of these films, right? But this one is a little different. It's directed by Douglas Aronofsky and written by Luke Passmore. And it has a great cast to it. Sean Ashmore, Dominic Monaghan, Ashley Bell, Shannon Sossaman. Really good cast. And Michael Eklund even is in this. It's a little different than some of these films because we see this group and we see that, at one time there was a greater number of them. There was probably, I think, like 12, and they got picked off in different ways, and we see some of that through flashbacks. And we also feel like this group is very disconnected. Like, there's a couple people that like each other, and then there's, more people in the group that they just seem to like, they're in this group so they can survive, right? And I think what really makes this work is that there's no zombies in it, and we're not given some kind of big long scene at the beginning that shows us the end of the world. We're just thrust into this situation where they basically, it ends up being like a home invasion thing. They're trapped inside a farmhouse. They're out looking for food, and this gang of like roving cannibals comes up, and it just becomes one thing after the next where they can't get away from them. And yeah, I think the bad guys in this really make it work. The cannibals are fun. Cannibalism is something that seems that, like, at the end of the world, they hint around about it. We don't always just see full-on movies where there's cannibals everywhere, right? But it was probably more likely than not, considering if you look at some of the things that have happened throughout history in Russia and things like that, when dictators were trying to starve out their own country and stuff. It's not unbelievable that cannibals are more believable than zombies, folks. I hate to say it, but it's true for me. And this is a very good one. Yeah, very rarely do you see like just full-on cannibals on display like this, and it's a good film. Also got a great cast of like heroes here, a great little group of protagonists. So it's a fun movie, and it's I would give this one. I'll give The Day. I'm gonna give it 6.5 out of 10. Is it the best movie of all time? No, but it has enough originality. And I really enjoy originality in a dead concept, okay? When we're talking about zombie films, and we've talked about, like, The Dead Don't Die, how The Dead Don't Die is just kind of a joke where they're saying this stuff is dead, but you guys keep watching it. And this is, like, this film would be easy to throw into that realm because it's post-apocalyptic. But they don't do zombies, they do cannibals instead. And there's enough creativity in this thing that we've seen already, so many times that's what makes it work. And I like it. This is the same reason, like, people ask me, how can I watch so many bad movies, or how can I watch so many found footage movies and things like that? Because when you do find creativity in a ocean of monotonous crap, then that's when it's even more special for me. When you find the really good gem, that's when it's worth it. This one is pretty good. It's got enough, like I said, enough to keep it going and make it its own thing. So I really like it. The Day. And guys, that's all we've got for this week. Now, I know who we're challenging next week, and I can tell you, but I'm not going to this time. I'm going to leave it like that this time. And I would just be highly suspicious. If you're a friend of the show and you've been on before and stuff like that, there's a real good chance that you're going to get got. All right, guys, we'll talk to you the next time we got something worth talking about. Bye.